Hello, and welcome to this session of Coach's Corner. For those of you who've been tuned in already, we just did a little meditation, but for those who are just tuning in, just take a moment and ground yourself in this space and open your mind and open your heart, and let's move forward. So my topic today is really about connectedness, or there's a lot of different ways I wanted to title this, and I couldn't quite put my finger on one of them. Uh, at first, my thought when I was writing it was really leaning into the myths of separation, but I think that's kind of, I don't know, it's disconnecting from the independent being that we are. So as we go through this session today, I want you to see the, the duality of what this good discussion's about. Seeing ourselves as separate and unique and special, but that connectedness that we all should lean into. In this journey of discovery and whatever path we're on, we need to reflect on the fact that so many people and so many of us spend our lives or spend portions of our lives as seeing ourselves as separate. And so many people take pride in that independence. And we talk about independence quite often, owning our decisions. Um, when we grow up, we're taught to wear that badge of independence as a badge of honor, to see ourselves that way. We set our boundaries, we build our fences, we attend to our goals with a confidence that we are our own person and we can do it all, right? And as we've discussed in another session or in several other sessions, boundaries are important. Boundaries are freaking important, right? Without boundaries, we're setting ourselves up for depletion, for challenges. But we have to make sure our boundaries aren't so firm that we're disconnecting from the reality of life. As we lean into our practice, we begin to discover that some of the boundaries we've set don't feel right. We set a boundary that we think is right, and then we try to enforce that boundary, and it feels wonky or feels off. And that's deep down in our heart. We're telling us that's our heart telling us that that boundary is too solid, too firm. In theory, that independence and the boundary and this wall or bubble we put around ourselves is important. But this theory of separation, this theory of separateness, doesn't quite hold true to the reality of our life. In fact, that theory and that feeling of separateness and independence is really a fallacy. So, in our practice of mindfulness and as healers and whatever practice we lean into, we need to start to lean into the connectedness that we have with others, to not forget about that connectedness and how we are all here supporting one another in some way or another. Or maybe we should question that reality. Do we support each other in some way or another? When we focus on our authenticity and we focus on our true vibration, we start questioning our basic identity, and we recognize it's not easy to challenge all those messages that we told ourselves about ourselves for all those years, or those messages and those labels that people have put on us for all those years or all of life. But one of the lessons that I want to teach, and I continue to teach over and over and over again, is to reawaken that curiosity that says why. Why? Awaken that curiosity where we should question ourselves, question the stories that we've been telling ourselves about ourselves, question the stories that our teachers, our parents, our friends put on us, question the stories of the things that happened to us or the things that we did when we were younger, and let's bring them into the present and say, does that define who I am now? And then we should always question what's important to us. And then we should continue to challenge our perspective to reawaken that curiosity that says, why? Why am I doing this right now? Or why do I believe this thing that I tend to believe? So many of us develop this sense of comfort with seeing ourselves as separate from others, or we see that person that we disagree with, or that political party, or that belief system, or that religious thing, and we see ourselves separate from that, us, separate from those things. But are we really separate from them? As we practice leaning into a sense of acceptance, that radical acceptance and that presence in our life, we begin to take pride in our uniqueness, and rightly so. We should own our choices. We should own our commitments and our decisions, and we should feel good about owning them. And that's really about being mindful when we start accepting our truths. But if we disconnect, when we start disconnecting from so many things in our life, we disconnect from those outside messages that don't fit into this unrealistic reality of who we think we are, or we pay attention to things and people that don't resonate with us when we shouldn't, right? Should we disconnect from that group of people that we don't resonate with? Should we see ourselves as better than or different than? The truth is, in our practice, we have to take responsibility for us, our responsibility for our energy, for what we're putting out. That's a true mindful practice. We have to be careful, though. As we lean into owning our lives, there's a danger of believing in separateness rather than oneness, of disconnecting from the fact that we are part of something bigger. Instead of standing in our righteous indignation and say, I am unique and special. I am unique and special, but that doesn't mean I'm not part of something more. Because the truth is, there is no peace, there is no truth in that separateness. There's only disappointment and loneliness. So, on our journey of curiosity, aren't we called to investigate this connectedness and how we fit in to the community? Aren't we meant to lean into the concept of oneness and not seeing ourselves as separate from that thing or that person or that? In the world of vibration and energy, we know that we're all part of this energetic ocean, this universal field of energy that we can't remove ourselves from. We are part of all that. So can we see ourselves as separate from that? So as we begin to see ourselves as separate, we can disconnect from the truth that we have had so much help in our life, that all of our life we've had support. Our entire life, there's been this connectedness. Every day we have help, whether we accept that help or not. Every day there is support all around us in so many parts of so much of our community. We couldn't really survive in the way that we move through our life without that sense of community, without that togetherness. So when we open ourselves up to the reality of our life, that we are all connected, it helps us move out of those feelings of loneliness, of disconnection. And then we can start realizing that through all of our life, in some way or another, no matter who you are or what you do, you have been supported. You have learned lessons. You have even been nurtured by the earth and the sun and the air and the moon, nurtured by the energy of your favorite song, or nurtured by these things that help us thrive, nurtured by the fact that we have flowing water and lights that come on. And to discover this connectedness, we have to let go and take our ego out of this practice. Our ego wants us to stand against the truth of oneness, to see ourselves as separate. But you know what? If we listen, and in our practice of heartfulness, our heart tells us no, we are all connected. If we listen, we can feel the pull of our heart always, even in those times of loneliness. So when we open our eyes and look at the whys of life, we begin to put all the pieces together. We look at this puzzle of life, and with gratitude, we can reflect on all the people who have taught us lessons, the good and the bad, those lessons that we looked for and those lessons that kind of knocked us upside the head, those lessons that we climbed to reach and those lessons that we stumbled over, whether intentional or unintentional. We've had support, those things that have made us stronger. All those who offer us services through our whole life, from the doctors to the teachers to the cashiers to the cooks and the waiters to the mechanics to the doorman to the mailman, all those people have been part of our life. And this path of connectedness actually leads us into this space where we can start to have faith in humanity. In the midst of all the troubles and all the pain we see and all the suffering we see in our world, we can start to feel that connectedness and lean back into that and understand that that is the doorstep to our true purpose in life. to see that we are all connected and that we all have a role to play in this life. And yes, we are special and unique, and we all have a different vibration. But when we put those vibrations together, we become the symphony of the universe, the symphony of life, of humanity. When we start leaning into that truth, that we are all connected in some way or another, it can inspire us. It can bring us such joy. It can free us from the burdens of self-importance and those limitations that we put on ourselves to say, I have support. Even when I stumble and fall, I have people in my life that will be there to pick me up, to hold my hand, to open their heart, to have an ear to listen to. But first, we have to let go of what we think we are and open ourselves up to discover that truth, that we are part of something much bigger. The other thing we need to redefine is so many people in our life tend to define ourselves as our physical body. This is me. As if the edges of our skin define our boundaries. But the physical body is just that, our physical body. But when we dig into our practices and we lean into the energy of our life, we can see that we are so much more than just our body. We're not just this three-dimensional structure of me. This isn't my boundary. This isn't all of me. When we even talk about my body, I say it's my body. We don't say it's me, it's my body. So if it's me, then why do I say it's mine? It's me. No, it's mine. It, if that's it, then how do we explain the things that move us to tears? Those things that happen outside of this physical body. How do we explain the joy we feel when someone we know has a baby? Or that joy that we feel when our pet, and we open the door and it's standing there wagging its tail ready to jump into our lap. How do we explain that? If this is me, how can I feel the joy from that isn't me? How do we explain the anger and the sorrow that we see when all these horrible things that are happening in the world on the other side of the planet makes me feel something? If this is me, why would I feel something about that? That in my own independent world has nothing to do with me, but the reality is the dominoes of life show that everything is connected. That when somewhere in the world people are suffering, that suffering is received in us. If this is me, how can I feel a certain way when someone hurts me or tries to say something about me? When it's even somebody I don't know, why does that offend me or make me feel a certain way? These things and these people and these events aren't part of my physical body, but aren't they part of my reality, of my world, of me, right? This is my physical body, but there's more to me than this. So when we start looking beyond the boundaries of our skin, we can open ourselves up and see how much more there is to our life. Think about this wherever you are. Think about how the fact that we're surrounded by stuff. And some of that stuff in our homes, in our offices, in our spaces are useful. Some of that stuff is sentimental. Some of that stuff is charming and beautiful. And some of it is just plain junk, right? We all have some junk in our life. And I look at it and we're like, why do I have this thing sitting on my desk, right? What is it and where did it even come from? I don't know. But if we stopped every once in a while and took inventory and we traced the roots of that thing, where it came from, and we begin to see the intricate details in the web of people and materials that are part of our life. If we examine the stuff of our life with a deep mindful curiosity, if I sat there and looked at this thing and I thought about where it came from, this little Buddha, right? See the Buddha? You can see him, right? It's a weeping Buddha. Okay, when I think about where it came from, I can remember the person who gave it to me and what they said to me when they gave it to me, right? We examine these things with a deep curiosity, we can see that there's a lot of connection to others in our stuff, right? This thing, yes, somebody bought it for me. Oh, look, you have one too, right? So somebody bought it for me. And somebody put this in their store. Somebody made this. It came from somewhere else. There's so much more than just this thing sitting on my desk, right? It makes me feel a certain way if I examine it. And we start to realize that there's a lot of connection with others in our stuff, right? From the builders and laborers who built the structure that I'm living in, the office that I work in, the car that I drive, to those who make the furniture that I sit in, and the computers that I use to connect to all you beautiful people. When I recognize that truth, we can see that the conveniences of our lives, like water and electricity, those things don't just show up, they come from something outside of myself. There are things in our lives that are useful, and there are things in our lives that are decorative. And we can see that that's how we move through our life. We use stuff every day, and we're served by this stuff every day. And if something was a gift, it means something to me. If it was a hand me down, it has a history connected to it or a sentimental value. If we worked hard for something, if I struggled to purchase something that I thought I needed, we appreciate that, right? If we find an object in a space that moves us to feel a certain way, it has meaning in our life. So, but it's more than just a thing. We should think of the people who created it, the people who invented it. Think of all the materials that went into it. This was a tree at some point, right? Think of the tools that were needed to create it. And if we focus on an object with deep curiosity, we can change the vision of even a trinket. I remember I was asked to speak at this group. It was called Leadership Broward, and it was this group of business people, and there were about 150 of them sitting in front of me, not wanting to connect to mindfulness in any way, shape, or form. But I was on the schedule, so here comes this guy to talk about mindfulness, and I start talking about what I do, and they all get this glazed over look, and they wanted to pick up their phones, but they didn't want to, but they didn't do it. And I was like, what am I going to do to connect to these people? And I brought up this one little trick, and I said, I want you to try this one thing when you're sitting in your office and you're caught up in this in the midst of anxiety or stress, right? And I don't have one in front of me, but I said, pick up a quarter. And if you're in the States, a quarter is like, I don't know how much it's worth over there in Britain, but it's a quarter, right? Or maybe a pound. Yeah, you got a pound piece, right? Whatever it is, this coin. Pick up a coin and look at that coin and think about that coin and think about what's on, and you can examine the weight of it, the color of it, the feel and the texture of it, but look deeper than that. And you can see that usually there's some words inscribed on it. There's a face, there's something on it. There's a texture around the edge of it. Feel that. Spend a moment thinking about that. But look beyond that and think about the material that it's made out of. Think about the metal. Think about the fact that this was made in some machine and it has a value that was placed on it. But beyond that, as you think about this coin, think about all the people who have ever used that to purchase something. Think about how maybe it bought some child an ice cream, or it bought somebody something that they truly needed. And when you examine that way, it shows the connectedness of it all. And if we get past the ickiness that all these people touch this coin, right? We recognize that this coin connects us in a deep way. When we think about it in that way, if we focus on an object with deep curiosity, we can change the vision of even a trinket on the shelf to see that there is so much more to it than that trinket on the shelf. So if we look deeply at something, it can be something that I can say, this is mine, but is it really mine? Right? Maybe we're simply the keeper of this thing. I am the keeper of this thing at this moment. This thing's going to outlive me. I believe that. It's hard. It's going to outlive me, right? It's going to be passed on to someone else in some way or another. It might end up in a trinket store. I don't know those stores. What do you call those stores that you donate something and they sell it? Whatever. I'm losing the word. Maybe it's going to be given away. Maybe I'm going to give it to one of my nieces or nephews. I don't know. Maybe my sister will see it after I'm gone and say, I want this, right? It's going to go somewhere else. At this moment, I am holding it in my space, but eventually it's going to be held in somebody else's space. It might even go to a landfill. I don't know, but it moves on to somewhere else. Things come and go. just like we do. But we aren't separate from those things that come and go. In a deeply reflective way, we can see that the stuff is made up of other stuff, that everything, including us, is made a collection or arrangement of something else. Whether we're a person or a sofa or a quarter, we owe our existence and we should credit our existence to someone or something else. We tend to forget this truth and simply live and level ourselves as all of this stuff is mine, that we own it, including my body. But if we pause for a moment, if we look for the root and look to the root of all things, we see that there's a connection. There's some kind of connection to everything. One of my favorite lessons, and a lesson I use often in a beginner mindfulness practice, is how Thich Nhat Hanh talks about a sheet of paper, right? If you're a visionary or you're somebody who looks beyond the surface of things, we can clearly see that there's more to this sheet of paper than just a sheet of paper. Perhaps if you're a poet, he says, you can clearly see that there's a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. That without the cloud, there'd be no rain. And without the rain, the trees couldn't grow. And without trees, how could we make a piece of paper? Right? So the cloud is an essential part of the paper. Without the cloud, the paper wouldn't exist. If the cloud's not there, then the sheet of paper wouldn't be here. So we can say that the cloud and the paper are connected, right? Without the cloud, we can't have paper. And the cloud is in this paper. That's how he explains it. So if we look at this sheet of paper even more deeply, you know what? We can see beyond the cloud, and we can see above the cloud there's sunshine. If there's sunshine in this sheet of paper. If the sunshine's not there, the forest couldn't grow. In fact, nothing could grow without the sun. Even we couldn't grow without the sun. And so we know that the sunshine is also a part of this paper. And the paper and the sunshine are connected. And if we continue to look, we can see that the logger who cut the tree and brought it to the mill to transform it into this sheet of paper is here in this sheet of paper. And beyond that, we can see that the wheat or the food that logger ate is in this sheet of paper. We know that the logger couldn't exist without the food, without his daily bread, and therefore, whatever he ate became part of this sheet of paper. And the logger's father and mother are here too, because without them, he wouldn't have brought this log to the factory to make the paper, to have it sitting here in front of me. When we look at things this way, we can see that all things are connected. Because without the sun, I couldn't exist. Without the earth, I wouldn't be here. Without the vibration of the universe, I wouldn't exist. And the universe wouldn't exist. And we're all connected in that way. So without others, we couldn't exist. But not just other people, without other things. So I'm not separate from that tree I walk by every day. I'm not separate from that cloud that floats through the sky, or the rainbow that appears, or the sunrise every morning, or the ocean that I love to look at in the morning. So it's easy for us to say that the skin of my body is my boundary between me and everything else. We tend to think of our body and its contents as mine. And since it's mine, I can do whatever I want to it, right? As an addiction specialist, I can tell you that's so many people wear that. It's my body and it's my choice, right? I can poison it with smoke. I can take drugs. I can do and eat whatever I want. I can saturate it with chemicals. I can treat it poorly. It's my body. But really, life has a way of reminding us that we are all connected. The truth is, when my body breathes out something else, somebody else breathes it in. Science points this out in so many ways. We can find smoke toxins in people who have never smoked before in their life, right? We can see that viruses are transferred from one person to another, even though that person was healthy, we picked it up from somebody else. That shows the connectedness of everything, and we should own it and take responsibility for it. It shows in how factory smoke from places that are far, far away affect other regions of the world. Science shows us what we can't usually see on our own, that we are all connected, that everything is connected to everything else. And we resist that truth. Maybe this is a type of protection. Maybe this is our defense mechanism. But when we resist that truth, we resist the reality. We don't want to be told that what we do impacts others, but it does. We don't want to be responsible for anybody else's stuff. That's your stuff. You take responsibility for that. I do me, you do you. And we move off in different universes, right? One universe. We're still part of this same universe. So many times we stand in our ego and we see ourselves as separate, but this maybe it preserves our sense of and this illusion of independence, that we don't want to or need anybody else, but we need everybody else. We need others to survive. If we open our eyes, we can see it for ourselves. We don't need scientists to tell us that. We can see this planet and the space that it in the place that it is in now in our history, and we can see how pollution affects everyone, even if that pollution doesn't come from my backyard, even if I have nothing to do with it. But that truth makes us uncomfortable. But it's no less true. When someone's suffering, you know what? We feel it. We can feel it. That's the way it works. When someone we know has lost a loved one, we can feel their pain in a deep way in our hearts. That's how we're made. The connectedness of our life, the way we are all connected, is the truth. I can't separate myself from that. When I see someone in sorrow and crying, I can feel their pain. I can feel it. When we put something out, it sends ripples out. What we put out goes out into the world. That's the vibration of life. That's how things work. And what we put out, the universe responds to. So some of those things that we put out are big and some of them are small, but the ripples of energy have an impact on everything around us. It might not be apparent to us in that very moment, but it impacts life over and over and over again. And the root of it all is that this is our truth. We are all in this together. We're all on this journey of life. And that should bring us together. That should make us feel to want to support each other. We are all connected in some way or another. And acceptance of this truth helps us ground us in our lives and takes away this feeling of separateness. And maybe, just maybe, if we shared this message more and more, we'd stop seeing others as the enemy. And we could start seeing them as part of the world, part of life. Because we're no less unique. We're no less special. Just as every flower in the garden is unique and special. But when we think about that flower, it doesn't compete with the flower next to it. It doesn't challenge that flower and say, I'm better than you. A flower isn't about competing with other flowers around it. It just spreads its scent and its color and it shines its gifts in the world in that moment, in the time that it's a flower. But the flower wouldn't exist without the rain, without the sun, without the air and the earth and the bees and the butterflies. But in its moment of glory, it has that opportunity to shine in the world. And the flower doesn't even care if anybody sees it. It could be a flower in the middle of a forest where nobody ever walks its path, but it no less opens its bloom and shines and spreads its fragrance. But it's part of the earth and it will go back to the earth. It's part of the universe. It's part of this amazing quilt that makes us all who we are. Special and unique, but not separate. Independent in our own way, but not independent in a way that we don't need others. When we start leaning into this truth and we start opening ourselves up to the connectedness of life, it takes away the loneliness. It reminds us that through our life, and maybe it wasn't as perfect as we thought it was, there has been love. Love is the foundation of everything, and we can't separate ourselves out from that. There is love in the way the sun shines every day, in the way the rain falls from the sky, in the way a friend sends you a message when you least expect it. There's a message of love in all the food that we eat, in the water that we drink, in the moon that rises in the morning. There's a message of love within our life, and when we open ourselves up to see that we are all connected in that vibration of love, It moves us into that space where we're there to support each other, to be there for each other, to cry with others, to hold someone's hand and to listen when they needed somebody to hear. It's like we're giving this overall sense of love. And when we walk in love in all that we do, guess what? We're walking our path of truth. And that's my message of connectedness. There you go. That's a good message, right? Thank you for listening to my little rant today. Is that a rant? That's not a rant.
Thank you so much, Coach Bill. That was amazing. That was really what I needed to hear today. This is Carolina.
Hi, Carolina. I'm glad you were able to join. And I felt I needed that message myself. In the past couple days, I felt a little bit off. So when I sat and wrote it yesterday, I was like, yep, this is what I want. This is it. This is what I need. But then, as always, I don't keep these things to myself. I have to share them. So thanks for joining. Anybody have anything else when they comment? All right. I'm going to turn off this recording.